Welcome back to the Ari Hoffman Show on Talk Radio 570 KVI. Remember, if you missed any part of the show, you can always get the podcast at Google, Apple, Spotify, whatever your preferred podcast platform is. Remember, while you're there, to rate, subscribe, and share, so that way you and your friends never miss a minute of the show. Well, we've been talking a lot on this show about our high gas prices, how it's all thanks to the government's, Washington state government, that is, cap and tax plan that the Democrats passed in the Washington state legislature, which Governor Jay Inslee signed into law. But now it seems like there may be another fun little byproduct of this whole thing where our utility bills are going up. It gets worse than that. Apparently, Bob Ferguson's office was trying to cover that up from you, the consumer. Joining us now to discuss, the director for the environment of the Washington Policy Center, Todd Myers. Thank you so much for being with us today, buddy.
Yeah, always nice to chat with you.
So walk me through all this, because it's a really tangled web. But essentially, the utility company wanted to put it on, hey, this is because of the carbon tax. And then a whole bunch of people said, no, you can't do that.
So Puget Sound Energy has to get its rate requests approved by the State Utilities Commission. Utilities Commission is 3 commissioners, all of them appointed by Governor Inslee. So they put in a request to get a rate increase for natural gas, not electricity, but natural gas, and sent it to the Utilities Commission. And the Utilities Commission approved it and said, yes, the tax on CO2 emissions is driving natural gas prices up. So, yes, you can pass this along to customers. But then they said, but you can't tell them about it. So the Utilities Commissioners openly said, yes, the tax on CO2 is driving prices up. But when Puget Sound Energy asked to list it on the bill as a separate line item, the Utilities Commissioner said that is illegal. They made it illegal for Puget Sound Energy to point out that the increase was due to them having to pay more in CO2 taxes.
So basically, this thing's on our bill, and everybody goes, hey, why did it go up so much? This wasn't what it was last month. This isn't what it was last year. And basically, Bob Ferguson's office is like, yeah, you can't do that. The commission's like, yeah, you can't do that.
So there is a person called a public counsel. And they're located in the Attorney General's office. Their job is to represent the public in these rate hearings. So since the public doesn't pay attention to these, and there's some financial information that is hidden from the public, the Attorney General's public counsel can see that and represent the public's interest. But the person who is there now, she sent a letter to the Utilities Commission specifically saying that they should not allow Puget Sound Energy to list this. And her argument was that adding this line item for costs would make it confusing, that people would be confused by what was going on with showing this charge for CO2 emissions.
So we know better than the minions. Don't bother the minions, because they're not sharp enough to know this. They'll be confused. So she wasn't looking out for us. Let's be real. She was looking out for her party, right?
Yeah, and so the person who is there now came from a California organization that worked on utility rate cases, and that organization specifically says on its webpage that they are working for climate and environmental justice. So that's, the agenda of her previous organization. And this isn't just sort of insulting to the public. It's actually contrary to the laws of the state of Washington. There is a law talking about openness in our government. And Washington State actually has really good laws about government transparency. And the law that creates some of that openness says that public servants do not get to choose what the public should and should not know. Well, that's almost verbatim from what the law says. And yet this is exactly a case of where government, the Attorney General's office, and the utilities commissioners are doing exactly that, deciding what they should and should not know. But it actually gets even a little bit worse because the Utilities Commission then went on and said that Puget Sound Energy was required to list a credit. So for some low-income families, they get a credit that offsets the increased cost. That credit must be put on customer bills. That apparently is not confusing, but telling people they're paying more, that is confusing.
So pardon the cynic in me for a minute, but typically a lot of these low-income families are the ones who are usually voting Democrats, so they want the people they think are going to vote for them to see, hey, look, we did something nice for you, and they want everybody else not to realize they're getting dinged for something they did?
Well, whether they vote, for the Democrats or not, what they wanted to tell people, what they wanted to make people believe that they were getting a rebate without telling them that all the rebate was really doing was offsetting the increase. And somebody said, this is sort of like one of those shady stores where they raise their prices and then they advertise a sale when in fact you're still paying the same price. That's exactly what the Utilities Commission is doing, saying, yes, we're raising prices, but only tell people about the credit that they're getting. So it's intentionally misleading people.
We're talking with Todd Myers, who's the author of Time to Think Small and the environmental director for the Washington Policy Center. So I guess, what do you do now? Does somebody sue the AG's office? Does somebody sue Washington State? Do you have to get an initiative? Or is it just wait till the next legislative cycle and hope that they repeal this stupid thing?
Well, the utilities commissioners can change their mind at any time, and some folks have told me that they are already getting phone calls of people who have found out about this. Puget Sound Energy has about 800,000 natural gas customers. So if people call and say, look, I think this is outrageous, I want to see, what my charges are, then the hope is you can put enough pressure on the utilities commissioners to change. But that's the way this is done. So, and I think the Attorney General's office should hear it because the public counsel is not representing the public interests.
This is just unbelievable because they talk about price gouging. And we discussed this when we had you and Senator Wynn on the show with regard to the gas prices. If Washington State is charging over 90 cents a gallon in taxes, and they keep yelling about oil companies making over 80 cents a gallon in profits, and that's price gouging, then what are they doing with all those taxes?
Well, and what's remarkable about this is the reason I looked at this is because of this very issue, which is that Senator Wynn and the Governor Inslee and others keep blaming everyone else for the rate increases. And so initially when I saw this, I said, oh, well, here, the Utilities Commission, which the governor has appointed, admits that the tax on CO2 emissions is the reason that prices are going up. So there's no debate, right? They can't blame other people. They openly say, yes, you're paying more taxes. This is going to increase costs. And the second thing is that the Department of Ecology, bizarrely last year, sent a letter to the legislature claiming that increasing taxes on CO2 emissions would cause natural gas prices to go down. Now, how anybody signs that letter and believes that that's true, I don't know, but they put it in a letter to the legislature. And so that was the other thing. I was like, well, the Utilities Commission clearly says just the opposite, that increasing taxes on natural gas will cause prices to go up. And sure enough, here it is. So, this single ruling shows not only that the governor and the Department of Ecology are being dishonest about the costs, it also shows that the administration doesn't want people to know that that's what's going on.
Unbelievable, and at the same time, not. Todd Myers from the Washington Policy Center, author of Time to Think Small. Thank you so much for joining us today, buddy. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to chat about this.
We got a whole lot more to discuss as the show continues. You're listening to the Ari Hoffman Show on Talk Radio 570 KVI.